Welcome to our picnic in the park. I'm Fraser Myers, and today we'll be discussing civil liberties day and night. Joining us in the glorious sunshine, we've got lots of local volunteers and two special guests, Manik Govinda from the Manifesto Club and Thomas van Berkel from the Nighttime Industries Association. Manik, would you like to kick us off with some thoughts?
Yes, as you said, we're a campaign group. We campaign for civil liberties, greater freedom in everyday life. And the Manifesto Club has been focusing on a wide range of issues to do with public space and how that is becoming increasingly over-regulated. Our focus is very much about the things that we take for granted in our everyday lives, which could be about how we relate to each other in public space, how we move about and connect with other people. And the Manifesto Club generally feels that these are issues which may not be very much at the forefront, but they do affect us in the here and now from this park here and what we might be allowed, what we might not be allowed to do.
Okay, thanks, Manik. So behind us you can actually see the evidence of this creeping regulation of everyday life. A family there are just having a barbecue and a council warden has tried to shut them down. No one here is bothered about them having a barbecue. And for Hackney Council, this kind of behaviour has to be regulated and supervised.
I think that things like this are happening because people are complaining. I think it's built up slowly, that have given the council and given the government the message that we need to step in, and people can't handle certain situations themselves and they're just handing it over to the government. I feel like if someone was, irritated by, a normal barbecue, that something could have been said themselves.
So too many busybodies, basically, in the public as well as officials. Okay, let's now hear from Thomas.
Great. Well, thanks for having me today. It's nice to be here with all of you in this beautiful weather. I work for the Nighttime Industries Association. We were created by a group of venue owners just because of the ongoing issues that nighttime industry is facing. So nighttime economy is anything from sort of 9 p.m. onwards. So whether you want to go to a nightclub, whether you want to go and listen to live music, whether you want to go and have a baguette at 5 a.m. in the morning, whether you want to go to the theatre and when you leave the theatre you want to go and have a drink with your mum or your dad. The whole nighttime ecosystem is what we're about. And the reason we got created was because there were a growing number of venues that have been closing. Over the last 5 to 10 years, there have been almost 50% of live music and nightclub venues closed. So from our perspective, this was a fairly big deal. Strangely enough, since the Licensing Act in 2003, which created essentially 24-hour business, alcohol consumption has actually gone down. Violence has gone down. Alcohol-related crime has leveled off. In actual fact, we're better behaved and doing better than ever before. Yeah, at the same level, the amount of regulation and controls are actually, inversely going up. And also there's a tendency now, which is, especially within night culture, which is making venues responsible for the behavior of the people. It's quite unusual. If, for example, there's a fight outside of a nightclub, now what they're saying is that the venue is responsible for that fight. If you were to go to a venue and leave and something bad were to happen maybe an hour or two later, the venue is still held partially responsible. But there are some things that are out of our control. People sometimes do and say stupid things. People sometimes get in fights. And that is part of life. And it's a shame that venues nowadays are held responsible for these things. So, for example, if you were to go to a supermarket and there was a fight or a misdemeanor, they're not looking to close the supermarket down. If you go to a hotel and take drugs, nobody's looking to close the hotel down. Yet, in the nighttime arena, a lot of venues are being held responsible for the behavior and people. And I guess what's also associated with that, if venues are responsible, it means people aren't responsible for their own behavior, which is a really interesting topic. As an organisation, we fight for the fair treatment of venues and to promote a thriving nighttime ecosystem.
I think that there is a certain element of discrimination in regards to age, race, everything, even the way we're dressed. I'm curious to know if you agree with that.
I was wondering, where is the root of this over-regulation trend lay? Is it a case where the state is imposing its will in society, or is it within the civil society? And when I looked, for example, at the Victorian bylaws, where there was kind of, opposition from the working class and the masses, they saw it was an elite project that were trying to contain them. That doesn't happen now.
I feel like there the regulations of civil liberties have slightly gone too far. They use words such as the war on bird feeding, and which you would normally use against stuff like the war on drugs or the war on terrorism. I was like, and it just made me think what your opinions were.
One question around, are they targeting specific groups, young people, working class people, compared to maybe more middle class areas and affluent areas? Is it more likely to be restrictive in Brixton than it is in Epsom, for example? What you find is that with the public space protection orders, they're so specific to particular localities. So, for example, Hillingdon Council have put a restriction within certain areas, and I think they are council estate areas, where if there's 2 or more of you hanging around, you'll be asked to disperse and move on. And that's, of course, that is a specific target group of working class, multi-racial environments where they're just stopping people from perhaps having a good time because maybe, yes, there could be the odd 1 or 2 person complaining about too many young people hanging out in the council in the estates. And I just feel that we should be able to do a lot more negotiated self-regulation between us in communities. And I think one of the problems is the breakdown of community. There is something about the contemporary society that we live in, which I think is becoming a lot more atomized, individualized, and privatized. Privatized, I'm saying that in our psyches, we are becoming less resilient about and fearful about how we deal with what could be seen as maybe bad behavior, and there is bad behavior, we can't deny that. So, for example, if I'm going to tell some kids off for being too loud in my area, you might be worried. And that's the kind of fear that we have, rather than if, Johnny's mum and dad comes round and wants to punch me in the face for having a word with little Johnny, we should be able to rally other people, say, well, look, he was well out of order, actually, and be able to deal with it there. It sounds idealistic, but I hope that we can still have those conversations and negotiations between us as human beings.
In terms of why it's like this, the authorities are in a very difficult position. They've had their budgets massively cut. They've had their targets put up. Their primary concern is protection and safety. I guess that opens up an interesting question. Is that all we're here to be safe? There is an inherent risk in living, whether we're having a picnic or whether we're going out and about, and trying to completely eradicate that risk is kind of impossible, in my opinion. The Met Commander last year actually said that it would reduce the number of pubs in the UK, then there'd be a reduction in crime and violence. So again, it gives you a sense of some of that are interested in sort of shaping and sculpting the society that we live in.
There seems to be this expectation that you can live your life without there being any sort of friction or tensions, and any tensions that do kind of arise have to be dealt with by someone else. And in my experience, you see that kind of really taken on by the younger generation, who are constantly asking for safe spaces and all of these other issues. I was reading Vice, which presents itself as a very kind of edgy, youth culture magazine, and they were arguing that music festivals need more security, which seems extremely strange coming, from my point of view, who I'd like there to be less bouncers, and it'd be better if I'd like to never see a policeman ever on a night out. Personally, I think you often feel treated like a criminal sometimes going into a club, and some places now have these sort of metal detectors and sniffer dogs and all that kind of thing. And is there a problem now that people just have this expectation that everything must go smoothly? We can't deal with it ourselves.
I personally disagree with what Fraser said, for the simple fact, on websites such as Instagram, I've seen things where in festivals, instead of paying to get in, people have just broken in. We do need more security, and our generation can't be trusted to really do anything.
If you've been walking in Shoreditch or around Brick Lane, you can see that there is a binge drinking culture in the UK, and there's lots of people that really can't control their behaviour late at night. And I think it's a very narrow perspective as a guy to say that, but I think as a girl, when you're walking home on your own, it's nice to know that maybe there's people that are keeping an eye of people that are out of control, especially at festivals, that are kind of ruining the experience for other people.
Can't underplay the role of technology as a whole, in kind of destroying like relationships between people. We don't talk to each other in general at all, and I think the whole online platform and like interface has changed how we interact socially, like, and that's not really our own doing. And like with regards to like Victoria talking about like Instagram and that whole wireless festival incident, like I think that also adds like the fear mongering, and like we're connected so much that we think that happens all the time as well.
I actually agree with Raiden. I think that there's this, like with technology, there's this whole idea of like online warriors. A lot of people will say things online that they can't summon the courage to do in, you know, real life, in reality, face to face. Things like, oh, there's a group of youngsters being too loud, but they won't tell them to their face. And I think it's a sort of thing of people can handle saying things online or through the medium of technology because there's less consequences. You don't have to genuinely deal with someone's reaction to that. It's become easier to live online than it is in real life.
I wonder whether, because young people today have this expectation that authorities will step in, there is a constant appeal to other people to arbitrate between your kind of problems and frictions. The problem is that these kind of regulations actually damages your capacity to be able to deal with problems yourself.
When I was a young person and did a lot of raving and clubbing, the restrictions for me was my mum and dad. You know, they were pretty strict, and so I kind of created my own little sort of daydreaming worlds until I was able to get out into the real world, which was fantastic. We might just be too much in this sort of sense of this imagination of fear that sort of has taken over through, as you said, technology and social media amplifies things so much more than what it might be in real life. If Hackney, when it was starting to criminalise rough sleepers and homeless, why is that? The history of rough sleepers and homeless and public drinkers has been with us, particularly in kind of urban areas and town centres, you know, for decades. And suddenly that is seen as excessive behaviour. I don't think it's as more excessive as it was back in my days when I was quite happily, a great fond memory of being able to sit on Trafalgar Square on the Lion with a crate of beer with two friends and drink through the night. We'd just make friends with strangers. And I think that kind of what I would call interclass, interracial contact is sadly lacking a lot more so now. And that is because I think we're becoming zones. Brick Lane, for example, where it is almost a kind of dividing line between the Bangladeshi community and the kind of more gentrified areas of Brick Lane. We almost become scared of what is the public. That can be winos and drinkers and rough sleepers and public drinkers. It's all about, you know, how do we have this sort of sense of being able to talk to people and have that mutual respect and tolerance.
We're living in remarkable times from a night culture perspective. You know, ID cards are now almost standard in most venues, which interestingly enough wasn't actually voted for in Parliament. It was brought in by the authorities outside of Parliament. There's a whole range of different things now to control and measure behaviour, even though, as I said, things are being run better and stats are better than ever before. And all of these things do impact not only people's experience, but also venues. So, for example, there was a nightclub in Soho, popular generally for sort of middle-aged men and women. It had a perfect track record for 20 years, no problems whatsoever. And there was an incident, and it was dealt with really well. But on the back of this incident, the venue had to install a new CCTV system. It had to have an extra security guard on the door from 3 p.m. Suddenly, that all out of the name of controlling this behaviour, which was really just a one-off, that having to install all that new equipment could make the venue bust, right? It costs a lot of money. I hear stories from across the UK, venues having to bring their licence forward to maybe 1 or 2 o'clock as opposed to 3 or 4. Now that might not seem like that much to you, but an extra couple of hours in the name of control will send the venue out of business, because that's when they make their money. I think personally what we've lost is the ability to communicate with each other. And I mean that just in terms of being able to talk about these issues. It seems very much recently that this very top-down regulation, as opposed to us actually being able to discuss a lot of these issues and work out solutions that work well for everyone. Now, obviously, we're here today, and there was this incident over here with the barbecue, and I guess somebody reported that. Now, anything that you report to your councillor has to be followed up with. So any email, any angry resident has to be followed up with. But it's not like you guys are going to email your councillor, your local councillor, to say, wow, we had a great picnic in the park today. Wasn't that awesome? But all of that would also have to be followed up. And I think, maybe that's something that needs to be looked at, because we ran a campaign in Hackney recently, and there were some people that were unhappy with the level of noise. And people's concerns are important, right? We're not saying they're not important. Everyone matters. And if someone's not sleeping, or if someone's finding, a local pub, that's important that those issues are talked about and addressed. But it turns out that in Hackney, the amount of support we had for our campaign was over 5,000 people, which makes us the biggest residents' body in Hackney, even bigger than the number of people that voted for the deputy mayor in Hackney. So what that means is that a huge number of people, in actual fact, the silent majority, are people that actually want to live in a thriving nighttime industry. And it's important that everyone's voice is heard, not just the people that are upset, but the people that are happy as well.
I'd say lots of really good points have been made, but I think we're placing too much faith in the possibility of self-regulation. To me, it seems a bit idealistic. Yeah, the vast majority of people are sensible and nice and know how to conduct themselves in public, but there are a lot of people out there who are horrible, who have no concern for anybody else, and what they think is acceptable behaviour might not be the same as what everybody else thinks is acceptable behaviour. I also think there are a lot of very lazy people out there. Lots of us are just very, very lazy and don't want to have to walk across the street somewhere to tell someone to turn their music down. There's fear as well. They're scared of what might happen to them if they do have to walk across the street and tell someone to turn their music down. So for all those people, regulation, you could say, is almost a backup for them. And I think people regulating the behaviour around them has to go hand in hand with regulation, because at the end of the day, the police are not able to enforce every single rule and law that is out there anyway. It's completely impossible. So it's forced upon us anyway to, let people know when they're doing something that wouldn't be socially acceptable.
I'd like to actually disagree with what you said, because I think that even if people don't want to say anything about something that they feel is affecting them and their sort of freedom, as it were, I think that you need to go past that. In a lot of cases, maybe someone is drinking, they're being very loud around you and you don't like that. I think that it is your own responsibility to say something about it, unless of course you genuinely can't control the situation and you do need to get the sort of police or people in charge involved. I mean, I myself, I'm a 16-year-old girl, and in a lot of situations, many other people my age might feel that they can't say something, or that they're too uncomfortable, or they don't feel enough power in themselves to say something. I feel a certain way about something, and it is my responsibility to do something about that. And the repercussions of that is if other people agree with me but haven't said anything, if I go up and say something, other people will also agree and they will pitch in. If no one else is doing it, be the first person to start up a dialogue or action if needed.
Victoria, in response to your query, you basically suggested that you don't trust young people, you don't trust your peers. I find that shocking. What you're saying is what led us here, where we are now. This constant seeking for experts, looking up to unelected people to regulate behaviour on your behalf. Society, or the big society that Cameron tried to create, doesn't work top down. It is all of us that make a big society. It's a bottom-up process. Regulation does not give you security, does not give you that security that you think that it does. Actually, for me, it gives the opposite. If you can't go up to a kid and say, stop smashing that bus stop, right? The kid thinks that, all right, if no adult is saying anything, he can feel that. He can feel that the parents and adults in general lost authority. And that for me is detrimental for all of us.
I agree with you, Marissa. I think, Efwa, you're completely wrong to say that, regulation sort of backs up good behaviour and sort of bolsters people who want to intervene. I think it totally undermines that. It devalues the importance of our own actions and our own responsibility. And, I would go further and say that we need as little regulation as possible. We don't want the state to have any involvement in trying to change our behaviour. It should be there to lock people up who perform extremely deviant and violent acts, but not for normal things like sitting around, having a fag in the park. It really is important to defend our freedom because we are the ones who are best placed to make judgments about our own lives and about the people who are around us. It's not someone from outside. These laws take away our responsibility, and so they undermine social solidarity and they undermine our capacity to change things and create the society we want.
I'd like to address Efwa's point, what she said about the fact that, a lot of people are, a bit lazy, to address certain issues that happen, like they can't be bothered to tell people, turn the noise down or whatever it is that they don't like. The problem with allowing people to be lazy is that generation after generation of people are going to be lazy. And we don't want that. I've got kids and some of us are going to have kids in the future, and we don't want to believe that we have to run to some law or some person who doesn't even know us or understand us to rectify our disputes and our problems amongst ourselves. That's no good. We need to try to address the issues that we've got as people amongst each other. The fact that we are afraid of each other. Why? Why don't we address why we're afraid to tell our neighbour or this teenager, the noise is too loud or there's too much whatever. Why are we afraid or why are we lazy? That needs to be addressed. Not, no, let's leave it to the law people to, decide these things, because we have to think about not just us, our children, our children's children, and we want them to be decent human beings. And the only way we can do that is if we do it ourselves. You don't depend on anybody else to do that for you. There was this idea of the nanny state, and it seems like what they were talking about has actually come true. We've got kids who are growing up, cotton wool kids. They're afraid of things, which is absolutely ridiculous. We need to get together and have a community again, because the same thing is going to be happening again and again and again. And where would that lead to? Total overtaking of the state of our ideas, our actions, which is really wrong. I don't agree with it at all.
Don't think that it's an either or. I think in a city like London, of course it would be ideal if everyone got out and talked about every single problem that they have. But it's a very transient city. Nearly half is foreign-born, especially in areas like Shoreditch or areas like Hackney, which have young populations that probably move apartments every year. If you have transients, you're not really going to have people know their neighbors that well, or even have the time in the modern schedules that we have where you're going to work, going to school. Maybe parents that have children are working multiple jobs to be able to afford to live in the city. So I think it's a very nice idea, and I think that it can be a balance between the two. But I do think there's a reason that you have the council, and they do listen because they're being re-elected by people in that borough. And when you're talking about freedom, that's also a very contested subject. I mean, not everyone agrees that smoking a fag in the park and being able to pass out at 3 a.m, like if you come from a background where it's not accepted to drink alcohol, for example, or where you don't think women should be out on their own at 3 a.m. with men that they don't know, you have to keep in mind that it's from our kind of, depending on what your background is, limited perception of what is important to have as actual freedoms.
Cheers to freedom. We need to toughen up, and a bit concerned that a lot of young people here just feeling really kind of, as you said, cotton wooled a bit.
I was just going to say, I think two of the things we need to really rediscover are tolerance and judgment. A lot of people confuse tolerance today with a form of kind of non-judgmentalism, saying, oh, you must like everything. oh, you can't be judgmental. But I think the opposite is true. And if people are really, causing a nuisance, then yeah, tell them off. We shouldn't be afraid of saying what we think.
I really want to come back to if London is a worthy destination to come to now, because we've got all these restrictions and laws and licensing issues. Is London really worth coming to? What are people going to find here when they get here? Is it just this boring, shut down place that people don't enjoy themselves? That's going to spread joy and happiness around the world that we're just, not worth coming to. It's ridiculous.
I think what we should be talking about is and highlighting is our resilience, our robustness as individuals to deal with everyday situations.
I think just to finish, I totally agree with what you said, Marissa. And I think we should encourage and foster and teach people how not necessarily to just be intuitive or go with their intuition, but also to be able to be resilient and create greatness.
Really, at every point in our kind of life where we kind of encounter these things, let's question it. And let's see how we can not only question that authority, but do something about it.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. An extra special thanks to our special guests, Manik Govinda and Tom van Berkel, and to all our volunteers. If you'd like to take part in the next picnic in the park, please email us.